Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're going to go through every single division from flyweight all the way to heavyweight and pick out which is the most exciting matchup the UFC can make, which is the ones that we want to see the most. Now, some of these are going to be overdue title fights, some of these are just going to have a crazy buildup, and some of these, are just stylistically really compelling matchups. So, we're going to break this down from flyweight to heavyweight. I'm going to ignore the three women's divisions because honestly, it seems like the UFC themselves don't give a fuck about these. The first title fight for this in 2026 still hasn't even happened yet. So, we're going to ignore these divisions. But outside of that, we're going to go from flyweight to heavyweight and break down what is the most exciting matchup the UFC can make in each weight class. In the flyweight division, the answer is pretty simple. We want to see Manel Kopp versus Joshua Van. That is the most exciting matchup they can make. And, if you look at the rankings over here, I mean, obviously Pantoja is next in line for his belt. The way that first fight ended was, pretty anticlimactic. And when they booked Pantoja versus Van the first time, I'd actually picked Pantoja to beat Van with the wrestling. But after seeing that fight against Tatsuro Taira, I mean, Van scrambling just looks elite, top tier. And do we really see Pantoja holding Van down? It's kind of hard to see. On top of that, Pantoja's cardio does get a little bit iffy from time to time. The win over Steve Erceg that was extremely close isn't aging well for Pantoja. So, I think Joshua Van is going to have it against Alexandre Pantoja. It's going to be an interesting fight. The odds are definitely going to look a lot closer this time around. But I think that, Joshua Van will be able to kind of hold it up. And just if that fight, even does play in Pantoja's favor, it's going to be a lot of wrestling, a bunch of control. He's going to start to fade later on in the fight. Van's going to maybe link a little bit of a comeback. So it's going to be a close fight. It's going to be intriguing, but it's not going to be Manel Kopp versus Joshua Van. I even think, the build-up's going to be interesting because Manel Kopp is, pretty good on the mic. He does talk a lot of shit as well. So I think Manel Kopp versus Van is going to be the most exciting fight. I can't wait to see it, honestly. I do think Joshua Van defends his belt against Alejandro Pantoja whenever they do end up booking that. That's a fight I'm looking forward to as well. Honestly, the flyweight division in general, unlike some of the other divisions we're going to go through, like, maybe middleweight or light heavyweight right now, the flyweight division is actually one of the most exciting divisions, in my opinion. We have, Ramazan Temirov, who, just got that knockout win over Steve Erceg. And I was always super high on Temirov. I know he got popped for juicing, so that is interesting, but he looked fine off the juice, clearly. Temirov made his UFC debut against CJ Vergara. Absolute tank in that as well. Just threw bombs at CJ Vergara. It's really rare to see that type of power, in a flyweight. And then, we also have the Manel Kopps of the world. Tatsuro Taira is still extremely high level. Pantoja still in the mix. I mean, we'll see how he looks coming off that injury. Joshua Van, obviously one of like the most exciting champions of the UFC right now. So, this is a really intriguing division, but even after all that, I think the most exciting matchup has to be Manel Kopp versus Joshua Van for the undisputed belt. Now, moving on to bantamweight, the most exciting matchup I actually see in this division is Sean O'Malley versus Peter Yan, the rematch for the belt. Now, the reason I say this is just because I think that, while Peter Yan, I think, is actually a pretty good and pretty exciting fighter to watch, Umar Nurmagomedov and Murad Valishvili, I mean, these guys are really high level. But I just think that their fighting style isn't the most exciting. Even the fight between Umar and Murad, that everyone was like, the buildup was pretty fire. The fight was extremely, extremely close. And obviously, Murad does pull off the upset in that matchup. But, in that matchup, if you go watch that fight, not much really happened. It wasn't like the most fun fight to watch stylistically. So, while, they are extremely high level and they are super elite, um, Sean O'Malley, I still think, is one of the most exciting fighters in the division when it comes to his fight style. And, Peter Yan, I think that's just going to be a banger every single time you put these guys together. The other thing that's interesting about this division is that the top three in this division, when it comes to Peter Yan, Miraj Valishvili, Umar Nurmagomedov, these guys just seem to be like a level above everyone else. Now, Peter Yan is interesting because, he is more of a striker. He obviously does have a very well rounded game, but Peter Yan can have closer fights with the Sean O'Malley. Obviously, he lost last time they fought them. I think Peter Yan might have a close fight with the Mario Bautista even. But, Umar Nurmagomedov and Murad Valishvili, their style is just so bad for, like, I think everyone else in this kind of realm, in this division. If you think about it, like, Umar Nurmagomedov dominated Mario Bautista. Umar Nurmagomedov dominated Corey Sandhagen. Murad Valishvili basically dominated Corey Sandhagen. Murad Valishvili dominated Sean O'Malley multiple times. These two guys, Murad and Umar, are kind of just like way better than everyone else. It's just like a stylistic problem, right? For everyone else, like their wrestling is just way too good. Peter Yan happens to be the one guy clearly against Murad in his last fight that was able to stifle some of that wrestling attack. So it's interesting because, these three guys between Peter Yan, Marab, and Umar are just probably not going to lose. Peter Yan, like I said, stylistically can still have some close matchups with some other guys in this division, but Marab and Umar, man, they've just kind of separated themselves from the pack. So I think that with Sean O'Malley, the position he's in right now, I think if you can, I mean, I don't think it's the right title shot to give. If you can somehow kind of manufacture some hype again around him, I mean, call him a plant, call him what you want, but his style is pretty exciting and he is still, a pretty interesting fighter to follow. So I think Sean O'Malley in the mix with Peter Yan, that is the only matchup he can kind of fight. Because the second, if Marab or Umar get the belt back off Peter Yan, I mean, what does Sean O'Malley even do in this division? Let's just think about it, right? Like, Sean's going to have to continue to fight down. Like I said, you guys aren't going to be picking Umar to lose to Sean. You guys realistically can't pick, Marab to lose to Sean. So at what happens to Sean O'Malley if this belt leaves Peter Yan's hands? I think he's got to move up. And honestly, Sean O'Malley has the frame to move to featherweight, so that's something I've been kind of clamoring for a while. Is can Sean O'Malley move up to featherweight? When Max Holloway was at featherweight, I thought that was one of the sickest matchups. Let's do Max versus Sean at featherweight if Sean can put on the extra couple pounds. So Sean O'Malley's gonna have to move out of this division, but when it comes to this bantamweight division, like I said, Umar and Marab have kind of separated themselves from the pack. Peter Yan obviously being the champion right now, and their fight styles are a little bit on the more boring side. I mean, call me fake, call me a LARP or whatever, but they do fight just like heavy control time. Marab will hold you up against the fence, shoot a million takedowns, and they're fun. Marab's a fun personality, so I don't mind it. I think he does build up fights pretty well. He's pretty good on the mic as well, so it's interesting. But I think Sean O'Malley once again still is the most exciting fighter in the division when it comes to like matchups to watch, and he's kind of cooked right now. Like if you can kind of get him in there with Peter Yan, that's probably like the last real chance he has. I also think like even if he beats Peter Yan and becomes champion, what do you do then? It's gonna be interesting because I just can't see Sean O'Malley ever beating Umar and Marab. It just doesn't seem like he's gonna have what it takes to beat them. So that's interesting for bantamweight. I think O'Malley versus Peter Yan 2 is the most exciting matchup. That's the one I'll be most hyped to see if it was booked. Maybe even O'Malley versus Mario Bautista, but in that matchup, I just see Mario Bautista. He is like such a high IQ fighter that he will do like exactly what needs to be done. So I can see Bautista pressing Sean O'Malley up against the fence like a Jose Aldo fight. And I think that if Bautista can do that to Aldo, who has, I think, significantly better takedown defense than Sean O'Malley, I think the fight between Bautista and O'Malley probably won't look as exciting as maybe it sounds on paper. So give me O'Malley versus Peter Yan 2 as the most exciting matchup you could book in the bantamweight division. Moving on to the featherweight division, the title fights in this one so far aren't extremely compelling for me. Volk is obviously one of my favorite fighters, probably everyone's favorite fighter, or in that realm. But at this age, Volk is extremely high IQ, and we know he's on a touch and go fight for a decision type fighter. I mean, it's really hard to beat Volkanovski by decision. So, Volk is not going to have the most exciting fights, especially with Movsar Evloev lined up next. The over whatever on that fight is like an absolute guaranteed hammer, in my opinion. Now, Volkanovski, yeah, like I said, not the most compelling matchups for him, but I think the most exciting fight you can book in this division is Kevin Vallejos versus Jean Silva, the rematch between those two. Now, those two fought earlier on Dana White Contender Series. Jean Silva won 29-28 on the scorecards. Very exciting fight since then. Kevin Vallejos comes in and, looks like an absolute blue chip prospect in the UFC. I think he's destined for top five. Jean Silva also destined for top five. I don't know why Jean Silva is ranked below Arnold Allen, even though he just beat him. So that's interesting. So I think Jean Silva already is a top five fighter in my opinion. Like I said, I think Kevin Vallejo's destined for the top five as well. And these guys are just going to duke it out. I mean, both have extremely slick striking. They both have real power. So it's going to be really interesting to watch this fight. And I mean, like, Jean Silva, I think should be close ish to a title shot soon. Obviously, like Aljamain Sterling's in the mix there as well. Lerone Murphy's coming off a loss, so it's going to be hard to kind of give it to him. So, I mean, Kevin Vallejos kind of shoot himself up in the top five, especially if it's a win over Jean Silva. That's going to be insane. I just think stylistically, this matchup is so cool. There's obviously the rematch factor in this as well. Sean Silva is always kind of a maniac too when it comes to like, how he is on the mic and how he carries himself. So very emotional fighter in Jean Silva. I think that, obviously very exciting fighter in Jean Silva. And Kevin Vallejos is going to be an insane matchup for him. And I think Vallejos, honestly, he beats Nathaniel Wood. He beats Yusuf Zalal. I think he beats Pat Sabatini as well. So I think this is the next matchup to make in this division. I think this is obviously the most exciting one. Let me know if you guys see anything else. in this one, I mean, obviously Steve Garcia, Melky Costa, these guys were on the rise, but they got stuffed. Arnold Allen stuffed Melky Costa, Diego Lopez stuffed Steve Garcia. So this is going to be an interesting one. Obviously, Delgado's in the mix too now, but I still think Delgado's had some iffy performances in the UFC, but Vallejos, man, he's just looked absolutely insane. So Vallejos versus John Silva too. That is the most exciting matchup. Let me know if you guys see anything else in this one. Let's move on to the lightweight division. This division is one of the most interesting ones. Obviously, lightweight has always had, the most stars out of all divisions in the UFC. It's been like the flagship division for the longest time. Conor Khabib happened at lightweight. So this has just been like the division. And, in this division, I think Justin Gaethje, like I know people say Justin Gaethje is underrated and like it's kind of true, but I just don't think Justin Gaethje is that good. Obviously, like when it comes to like the elite of the elite, like I see Oliveira beating him in a rematch. I see Sarukian, beating him. Max Holloway kind of pieced up Justin Gaethje for 5 rounds, knocked him out at the end. Paddy Pimblett, I mean, we saw what happened between Justin Gaethje and Paddy Pimblett. So, I don't think the matchup here is a title fight. I think honestly, the best matchup in this division is Ilya Topuria versus Arman Sarukian. That is the fight to make. Like that fight is going to be insane. Honestly, that fight can headline a numbered card. Ilya Topuria versus Arman Sarukian. Um, that should be like a. I know they're gonna do Arman versus Charles, so that's a little bit disappointing. It's kind of a little bit of a logjam because Charles obviously just straight rattled off wins since he lost to Ilya Topuria. Arman on the other side has been, very inactive, as we know, doing a bunch of other things. Ilya Topuria coming off the loss. So, between these three guys, it's kind of a logjam. Does Ilya Topuria get an instant rematch? I don't think so. I mean, I think if you have no defenses, you can get an instant rematch. I think that's just kind of how the world works. I don't think Hamzat should get one. I don't think Ilya should get one. So between Oliveira, Sarukian, I mean, Sarukian obviously should be next, but then, Charles versus Ilya is obviously not a fight we want to see. So I think Arman versus Ilya still to this day, I think stylistically, this is an insane matchup. I think Ilya is still extremely, extremely good. And I've seen some like dumbass reels, some dumbass comments saying like, Ilya loses to Arman, to Charles in a rematch. He loses to Paddy Pimblett. That's just dumb. Like I think that at the end of the day, Ilya Topuria is still an insanely high level fighter. I still think he beats Justin Gaethje in a rematch. You can kick rocks if you disagree. I still think he beats Arman Sarukian actually, and this is just going to be an insane matchup from all angles. Like think of the buildup here. Obviously, Arman Sarukian has been just kind of honing in on his media skills. So S tier media skills from Arman Sarukian. He's going to know how to clip farm his way into a bunch of moments in the buildup to this fight against Ilya Topuria. Ilya Topuria obviously always has had some decent mic skills. Very cocky, but we'll see how he looks after his loss. Maybe an interesting version of Ilya Topuria comes out there. So Ilya versus Arman stylistically is going to be insane. We know Ilya has insane power. Um, Ilya's going to have something to prove. Arman's going to have a lot of material to work with that last loss. The buildup's going to be insane. Stylistically, it's going to be insane. I think what it means for the division is also going to be insane. So I just can't see a better matchup here than Ilya versus Arman. They're gonna do Arman versus Charles 5 rounds, I believe, for the BMF. I think that's like basically booked or very heavily rumored. So it's gonna be interesting to see what Ilya Topuria comes back to. I mean, Ilya versus Paddy. I think if I had to give like a secondary matchup, assuming that Arman versus Charles goes through, winner fights Gaethje next year. If that's the case between those three, then with Ilya Topuria, you just give him Paddy Pimblett, and then winner of that kind of gets like the next title shot after that. So because Ilya's gonna take some time to come turn back around. Arman versus Charles should happen, I think, like in a couple months. Should happen in a couple months, and then you have that waiting for Gaethje, and then when Ilya comes back, he fights Paddy Pimblett. Winner of that gets the next title shot. Whoever has the belt at that. So maybe Arman beats Charles, Arman beats Gaethje, and then Ilya beats Paddy, and then we have Ilya versus Arman with the belt on the line, which would be ideally better with the belt on the line. But I think like that is the most hype matchup, right? Like, are we hyped for anything else over Ilya versus Arman? I don't think so. I think that's the biggest fight in the division. Like I said, the build up stylistically, what it will mean, whether it be like for a absolute number one contender or for the belt, obviously for the belt being better. So that's the matchup to make. Let's move on to the welterweight division. Honestly, this division is flush with contenders, so it is very interesting. We also have a title fight coming up at UFC 330 between Ian Gary and Islam Makhachev. I made a breakdown video on that fight, so go check that out if you're curious as to see what my thoughts are for that matchup. But in general, we have so many contenders here. We have Carlos Prates, Ian Gary obviously next up. Michael Morales, yeah, JDM's ass. Sean Brady looked good, but still kind of recovering from that Michael Morales aura loss. And then we have this guy Yaroslav Amosov. This guy is a problem. He is an absolute demon. We saw his UFC debut, and this guy's going to be a problem. I think we all know that. I think we all know Uros Medic, Daniel Rodriguez, MVP, Mike Mallet, and potentially even like Kamaru Usman. I don't know if Usman's going to fight at welterweight anytime soon, but Amosov should be above all of these guys. So, we have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to contenders in this division, but the most exciting matchup, there's no doubt, Carlos Prates versus Michael Morales. It is what it is. Michael Morales, insane power, insane, explosiveness. Carlos Prates, same thing. This guy has the absolute death touch. It's gonna be interesting because I know Michael Morales actually has some pretty good judo, and Carlos Prates, I think that's gonna be the way to beat Carlos Prates. I just can't see anyone outside of Ian Gary, who's I think one of the highest IQ strikers in the promotion, beat Carlos Prates in a striking fight. Like you got to move for 25 minutes straight the way Ian Gary moved. And first of all, not many people have the footwork of Ian Gary, and on top of that, not many people have the cardio of like Ian Gary. Michael Morales is a big welterweight, very explosive. We see, he is like absolute size mogging people. So can he move like that at all? I don't think so. And can he move like that for 25 minutes? Definitely not. So that's going to be a really interesting match because I think Michael Morales is going to have to, at some point, take the fight to Carlos Prates. He can't just run for that much. And, when these guys clash, is going to be like absolute fireworks. Someone's getting slept, and it's going to be very, very interesting because Michael Morales, obviously undefeated, looks like an absolute world beater. But then Carlos Prates, man, like what he did to JDM, honestly, though, I think JDM is ass. So, like, people are going to be really high on Carlos Prates after what he did to JDM, but I think I very much saw that coming because JDM is fucking garbage. So, take that as you will, but this is going to be the most exciting matchup. There's nothing else in the division that can excite us more than a Prates versus Morales. The only thing that can make it better is if there was a belt on the line. That should be like a BMF fight, honestly. I don't know what they're going to do with the BMF belt, but, you know, that should be like a very like crazy BMF fight. I think Morales is going to turn into a wrestler, honestly. I think Morales is not going to be able to stand up with Prates, but I think that him becoming a wrestler, I think could potentially work on Prates because Prates talks a big game about, how he grapples, how he does this, how he does that. But at the end of the day, man, JDM took Prates down with ease. Leon Edwards held Prates up pretty easily. So these guys are not like, Leon Edwards and JDM are known to be strikers. So I think there's like a bunch of suspect out on Prates' grappling game. He did have some pretty good scrambles with Ian Gary. He rolled pretty well with Ian Gary, but once again, primarily a striker. So very interesting. I don't know how Prates will hold up against someone that's going to really want to grapple them, like an Amosov, Makachev. I don't know how that's going to play out, but the most exciting matchup here has to be Prates versus Michael Morales. Moving on to the middleweight division. This division is fucking dead. Like, I mean, like, there is no matchup the UFC can make in this division that will make me go like, oh, holy shit, I really want to tune into this fight. I mean, if you think about it, like Dricus du Plessis, I think is the most entertaining fighter in this division. And nobody wants to see Duplessis versus Strickland 3, honestly. Like this is the type of headliner a Canada pay-per-view or Canada numbered card will get. It's like Duplessis versus Strickland 3, a fight that like nobody cares about, honestly. Chimaev can't be next for the belt. And honestly, this rematch between Chimaev and Strickland is not going to be that sick, in my opinion. Like the fight between Chimaev and Strickland was so crazy because of the buildup. Then they went all kumbaya at the end, and I'm okay with sportsmanship and all that stuff. I don't mind like I know a lot of people are like, oh, like they should still be beefing to death. That it is what it is. Like I don't really care about that stuff. But at the end of the day, the buildup is what made this fight so entertaining. What made this fight so fun. So if you remove that part of it in a rematch between these two, which honestly, first things first, Chimaev doesn't even deserve an instant rematch. You can't get an instant rematch without title defenses. That sits for Ilya Taporia. That sits for Khamzat Chimaev. So this fight is just kind of meh. DDP versus Strickland is meh. I think the fight that I would be kind of most excited and like excited is like loosely used in this context is Nasruddin Imavov versus Sean Strickland. Like Imavov, I think has been passed up for a title shot a couple times now. He got passed up by Chimaev, which believe it or not, like Imavov had a way more of a claim to a title shot than Hamzat Chimaev did. But they gave it to Chimaev because Chimaev's a way bigger name. And then Strickland jumped Imavov again. I think that one is honestly on Imavov. I actually had a problem with this because like Imavov, when Chimaev was champ, like they didn't give a fuck about knocking the next title shot. like Imavov would not have fought Chimaev as champion, and like Imavov wouldn't have wanted to fight Chimaev as champion. So Strickland goes out there, jumps him, ends up doing like the impossible, beats Chimaev, comes out there with the win, is now champion. So give me Imavov versus Strickland. I mean, it's a rematch. They have like some bad-ish type of blood. There could still be some sort of like build up to. Honestly, Imavov is also a very boring fighter. So Imavov versus Strickland, I think is the most exciting matchup. Outside of the division is dead. Like what do you do with Adesanya today? Kyle Barallo, got kind of dominated by Imavov. Joe Pyfer is not that exciting of a fighter. Brendan Allen is okay. Anthony Hernandez got beat by who did Anthony Hernandez lose to? Oh yeah, Sean Strickland. So he already lost to the champion. RoboCop, like this is literally like a top 10 fighter. Like, are we serious? So this division I think is like just fairly dead right now. But yeah, I think if you had to pick one of the most exciting matchups, it would have to be Nasruddin Imavov versus Sean Strickland for the undisputed belt. And we kind of have back-to-back divisions that are just like kind of bummy. This one I think is a little bit less bummy than middleweight, but Ulberg is injured. A potential interesting matchup, honestly, is potentially Alex Pereira versus Carlos Ulberg. That's another matchup between, Pereira and City Kickboxing where, maybe a little bit more of that Izzy storyline. But honestly, Pereira has just lost so much aura recently. Ulberg is not the most exciting fighter, in my opinion, either. I actually think the matchup, honestly, the most, and I'm gonna be shocked that Ankalaev is one half of it, which honestly, like Ankalaev, and you can't get it twisted. Ankalaev only has boring fights. I don't care what you say. You could say in that last fight, Guskov was running from him, sure, but like Ankalaev had a boring fight with Rakic. He had a boring fight with Pereira, the first one that he won. He had a boring fight with Guskov. Like, if this guy only has boring fights, I'm gonna call him a boring fighter. I'm sorry. Paulo Costa versus Ankalaev, give me that fight. I think that's like an interesting one. I just think the buildup will be interesting. I like watching Paulo Costa fight. I think he's a funny guy. So give me Paulo Costa versus Ankalaev. It's gonna be hard because like, what do you do with Yuri Prohaska? I think Alex Pereira comes back. If he does come back to light heavyweight, get a title shot. But I think Pereira's gonna stay at heavyweight. Honestly, I don't think Alex Perez is going to come back to light heavyweight. So, that would be intriguing just because of the City Kickboxing storyline being Izzy's friend, Carlos Ulberg, and then, Pereira's fighting him. Perez just out here just like dominating Izzy and his friends. So that would be funny, but I don't know if Pereira comes back to light heavyweight. I think Pereira's in a very weird spot, honestly. Yuri's in an extremely weird spot. So give me Costa versus Ankalaev as, the most intriguing matchup. Like, I don't want to see Ankalaev versus Ulberg. Honestly, like, I wouldn't even turn it on. Like that's one that I'm not even gonna watch. So give me Costa versus Ankalaev to be like the most intriguing matchup. Hopefully Costa can take this guy out, bro, because this guy is actually like he's very good. He's very high level. Don't get it twisted. But and it's not like a Russian thing. Like that's not the problem. Like Islam Makhachev can be a very entertaining fighter. Like his fight with Dustin Poirier was very entertaining. The way he fights, obviously the JDM one wasn't, but like even Chimaev, right? Like Chimaev can be an entertaining fighter. His fight with DDP was boring as fuck, but he can be. Bro, Ankalaev can't be an entertaining fighter. And Ankalaev wrestles the least. So it's not like a Russian wrestling bias that I'm talking about. Because clearly Ankalaev wrestles less than Chimaev and Makhachev fucking combined. But Ankalaev just doesn't do shit there. I don't know how he wins fights, honestly. So give me Costa versus Ankalaev. I think that's the most intriguing matchup. There's nothing else here in this division that really speaks to me. So yeah, let's move on to the heavyweight division. This division, I think, is very interesting low key because people talk a lot of shit about the heavyweight division. And I think, like, skill wise, it is still obviously probably the most low level division inside the UFC. But from an entertainment perspective, the heavyweight division is low key slept on. We have, Walter Walker, who's like submitting people like leg submissions only. Like he had 3 heel hooks in a row, then he had a knee bar. So Walter Walker is just like pretty entertaining, honestly. Waldo Cortez Acosta, I think, is an entertaining fighter. Josh Hockett, he's fucking, Josh Hockett, I guess. Rizvan Kuniev, a little bit less entertaining, but Alex Pereira, I think, is gonna stick around in this division. Um, Pavlovich is, pretty good. Pavlovich is still like sleeping people. Pavlovich is still a really good fighter. Volkov is a really good fighter right now. Cyril Gahn is somehow a really good fighter still. I hate Cyril Gahn though, honestly. Like I despise him, but honestly, that makes it interesting. Like Cyril Gahn is like a real hate watch for me. Like this guy ruined the heavyweight division, man. Like if you really think about it, like this guy fights Francis Ngannou. Um, could have beaten Francis Ngannou if he doesn't roll for a heel hook. He thought he was fucking Walter Walker maxing, but he rolls for a heel hook and loses that 5th round. Loses to Francis Ngannou. Then Ngannou has contract disputes, leaves the UFC with the belt. Now the heavyweight division looks like a bunch of chumps. Shogun goes out there, fights John Jones, gets absolutely murked, makes John Jones look, I'm not gonna say look better than he is, but like he dominated Cyril Gane in like 2 minutes. I just don't understand. Like Cyril Gane goes out there and just like looks like an absolute bitch against John Jones, and then goes out there against Tom Aspinall, pokes him in the eye in the first round, fight ending eye poke, fouls him out of there. Then goes out there against Alex Pereira, our Lord and Savior. Alex Pereira was supposed to come and save the heavyweight division and just goes out there and sleeps him. So this guy's like the anti, like, I don't know, this guy's like just a demon, bro. This guy's like the anti heavyweight division. So Cyril Gane's somehow still in the mix, and then Tom Aspinall, obviously, this is a really risky one. I don't know if this guy's ever gonna fight in the UFC again, honestly. Like the way, Eddie Hearn and Tom Aspinall have been moving, it's kind of rough to see how Tom Aspinall even gets back in the octagon. But I think the most intriguing matchup, honestly, is going to be Aspinall versus Gane. Gane's looking insanely good. The way he dealt with Alex Pereira, all jokes aside, even though I absolutely hate Gane, with the passion, Gane, I think, should have and could have beat Francis Ngannou. Um, Maybe John Jones is just on a level that like I can't even comprehend because John Jones is just like way better than everyone else. He's like Thanos thing out here. But Cyril Gane, he beat Alex Pereira, beat the shit out of Alex Pereira, honestly. Cyril Gane could have beaten Francis Ngannou, and Cyril Gane was looking pretty decent. Started that fight with Tom Aspinall. So Aspinall, with whatever aura he has left, I think he comes back, fights Cyril Gane. I think that is like the most intriguing matchup, honestly, the one I want to see the most. But if not that matchup, why not have Alex Pereira versus Josh Hawkett be there? Why, like, that is like, Alex Pereira comes into the heavyweight division and looks like he doesn't belong. Honestly, it's like it's pretty sad. He looked really slow in that fight, and maybe we need to give Alex Pereira a little bit more time to adjust. And that whole White House card, honestly, I just want to forget it. I hated that card, but in general, Alex Pereira versus Josh Hawkett, I think is a pretty intriguing matchup in this division. Um, but at the end of the day, I think the one that we want to see the most is just simply the one that's a low hanging fruit. Tom Aspinall versus Cyril Gane. That's gonna be the matchup that we want to see. Yeah, I mean, if you want, I can also low key rattle off these three divisions. I'm gonna be quick with it. Give me Zhang Willie to get her belt back. She's actually a very interesting fighter. So Zhang Willie needs to get the belt back. Mackenzie Dern's fucking ass. Um, Over here, Manon Fiorot versus Natalia Silva, easily the best matchup in this division. Valentina Shevchenko is like a fucking terrorist at this point. All she does is hold people down and control them. So Shevchenko needs to get the hell out of here. Honestly, Shevchenko probably one of the best, if not the best, female fighter of all time in my opinion. So all due respect there, but I think the most intriguing matchup, Natalia Silva looks insane. Manon Fiorot is, I think, really, really fucking good. I think Fiorot would beat Shevchenko in a rematch. I don't know if that's like the wrong thing to say, but Fiorot versus Silva, both these women have just looked insanely good. So that's the most intriguing matchup. And then just burn this division because, like, yeah, just burn this. Give me Aylin Perez. Aylin Perez versus Kayla Harrison. That is like the most intriguing matchup. So overall, I mean, the UFC in the Paramount era, I think, has been a little bit lackluster. Honestly, the title fights have been a little bit lackluster. I think it's like very, very evident what's happened. The UFC themselves have already got paid. I'm gonna try not to be like the the regular media UFC people that are just like hating on it the entire time, just like extremely negative because that's just fucking lame. Like I can sit here and complain about the UFC all day long, but what's the point? I'm gonna watch it either way. I might as well enjoy my time watching it. So, I think they need some quicker turnarounds on championship fights, but they've already gotten paid. They don't want to pay champions over and over again in the year. I guess it makes sense. But yeah, I mean, there's still some really cool matchups that the UFC can make this year. I really hope they make some of these. I know some of these might be matchups that come in the year after because there's other people in line for some of these fights, but the biggest ones, the ones that I'm kind of looking forward to the most, Ilya Arman has to be like number one on that list. Then after that, honestly, Van Cop I think is two. And then Aspinall, Cyril Gane is somewhere in there, and then obviously Protez Morales is somewhere in there in the top matchups I want to see. So this is kind of the way I think they should match some of these people up. This is the one I think that will be like the most fun way to match these fights up. And yeah, let me know in the comments. Let me know what you guys think. Is there anything that I missed? Any like really cool spots I missed? Any contenders? I've just kind of went over the rankings. If there's any unranked matchups that are going to be extremely intriguing, let me know as well in certain divisions if there's any unranked matchups you guys are looking for. And yeah, outside of that, I will see you guys next time around.